Hi, my name is Jack Williams, and this is my final media project from MUHI 100, Section 6, and it will be on Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture. So let's start with some background on the overture. It debuted August 20th, 1882 in Moscow, Russia by Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. The overture commemorates the invasion of Napoleon's forces into Russia from June 24th, 1812 to December 14th, 1812. Now, the French Grand Army, led by Napoleon, was forced to retreat Russia due to the harsh winter conditions and the push from the Russian armed forces. Now, this was a huge deal because at the time, the French army and the French territory and Napoleon's powers really claimed a lot of land at this time in Europe, and Russia not being taken over by France was such a big deal and showed how powerful they were at the time. So, the structure of the piece, the overture basically contains and shows parts of the war and the battle overall, and traditional Russian folk music and the tradition of Russia and the people of Russia overall. That's what basically what the piece talks about. And each piece and segment of the overall overture shows a part of the battle or a part of Russia at the time. So let's start with the first piece, the beginning. O Lord, save thy people. This Eastern Orthodox troparion is the main theme that is heard in the beginning of the piece and at the end of the piece. This section in the beginning of the piece is trying to instill the vision of the people of Russia at the time before the war. As the strings counter, so as we move on, we eventually hear the strings counter the flute and begin to crescendo and become louder. This eventually creates a sense of uneasiness that trouble is near, aka the French invasion is about to enter Russia. So going through this piece a little more, we hear this basic like flowing movement over all the strings. Moving on, we hear the flute coming in. The key becomes a little more mysterious. The strings will counter right here. It begins to crescendo and become louder. And here's that sense of trouble leading into the distress of the Russian people. The next theme switches from very smoothing in "Oh Lord, Save Thy People" to a strong theme, that idea that something wrong and something is coming. "Oh Lord, Save Thy People," like I said before, has more of a soothing theme, very flowing, and is very like beautiful and stuff like that. Where this next theme we hear is not so much like that, but it's very harsh, intense, and something is coming. You can depict this as the distress of the Russian people by hearing the cries of the lone oboe solo, and as the cries commence or decommence, um, the orchestra altogether crescendos and speeds up. So let's hear that. Here are the cries from the oboe. Here is the orchestra answering, more cries. The orchestra continues to speed up. They crescendo and get louder. Eventually they speed. I'm sorry, not speed. They slow down, become quieter. This tones become more elongated, leading to. This leads to the French army entering Russia. This segment, we basically hear the second melody to "O Lord, Save Thy People," which is what basically most people will think of when you talk about 1812 overture, the da 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 da. When you mention that to people, they will recognize what you're talking about when you talk about 1812 overture. This is similar to the first melody, however, it is quicker and it is more staccato. The segment basically is supposed to depict the French army entering Russia. This can be heard from the snare drum we hear right at the beginning. There's that main melody I had talked about before. Eventually this slows down, coming quieter. a long chord by the strings. This leads into the French beginning their attack on Russia. This next selection, it's really interesting because this is the concept that Tchaikovsky was going for. It shows that France is taking over not just on the battlefield, but in the piece as well. As we hear renditions of the French national anthem, La Marseillaise, it can be heard in segments of the overture. An attack can be assumed because the lines begin to speed up and become more syncopated. Eventually, chromatic lines come into. This indicates a sense of uneasiness and a little more tense. In some sections too, at this part, we can hear cries of war from the horns. Here's that speeding up I had mentioned before. The lines start to become louder. They're building up with these chromatic lines heading up. There are those cries of war by the horns. And there's chromatic lines you can hear in the background too. Eventually this slows down, slower, and becomes quieter. This eventually leads into our second theme, known as a shift from the battleground, really, to the Russian countryside. Now, Tchaikovsky really put this in here to show more of the beauty of Russia and show that this is not just war that's focused on, but really just the country in general, and that there's another side to it other than just war going on at this time. So, this can be depicted with word painting, too, as we hear very elongated lines coming through. This swelling is very beautiful. The strings are very crescendoing and decrescendoing. It's really creating a sense of this picture I show below, which is in the actual Russian countryside. Eventually, towards the end, we do hear the oboes and the clarinets guide us to our next theme. Here's a building we hear coming up. Here's this swelling and basically flowing movement overall from the strings. Skipping through, it gets louder, but you still have that wondrous movement, that idea of word painting we still hear. Skipping through, so you can hear the oboes begin to echo. The orchestra slowly begins to cut, and the oboes become very lone, along with the clarinets and the flutes. Eventually, it just becomes them. This leads into the Russian folk and heritage dance. Now, in this segment, we hear a very traditional Russian folk dance called Ovrut Vrut, or At My Gate, My Gate. Tchaikovsky picked this particular piece to show that there is tradition in Russia and there is culture. Unlike, it's basically, I guess you can say, smack talking, because they're saying we're more than war, we're more than fighting. Where they're basically saying to comparing them to the French, who are very war driven at this time, and that France is just basically war driven. There's nothing else to them. This basically depicts the opposite of that, showing that they have culture, they have folk, they have tradition that they want to display. This dance is basically led by a duo of the flute and oboe that moves very at a moderate speed, so I will play that. Eventually it becomes quieter, and the basses will lead into a line descending down. This eventually leads into repetition of past movements. There are some changes that we hear, but you mostly hear the same thing. We hear La Marseillaise again, we hear Overut Verut over again, we hear the Russian countryside rendition. However, we know this is going to change as we get to the final line of You verut verut. The descending line by the basses ends in a final note that is different, and it shows that we are leading into the finale. So let me just play a few segments from this. This is basically the French battling theme. There's that theme once again we hear of La Marseillaise. This is slowing down, elongating, and we reach the Russian countryside theme. This continues for a while, and eventually we lead into the Ud Verut Verut. As that concludes, we go into the final bass line. From there, we move on to the finale, the prelude. In this finale of the overture, we experience one of the most exciting contributions to classical music ever. The finale displays an idea that the French have been forced to retreat and the Russians are victorious. So let me start playing this, talk through it. We hear a call from the horns. As we continue on, this becomes louder, crescendoing. This eventually leads into the cannons. This is what really makes 1812 Overture. Something different. Something that we have never really seen before at all. Everything in the orchestra at this time is taken to a fortissimo sound. Very, very loud. And as I put below, it's a Calvin Hobbes cartoon of them basically talking about the 18 Overture. And he's very surprised because he's saying, I thought classical music was boring because they're firing off cannons. So I'm just going to play this. I'm not going to talk over it because I know I definitely cannot talk over this. This eventually leads into O Lord Save Thy People, which is the theme we heard again once at the beginning. Here the orchestra begins to slow down as it goes to repetitive fall, and as it slows, it gets louder. The fall leads into the rendition of O Lord Save Thy People, while the brass and strings echo that fall we heard before. Once again, this is the theme we heard before. I've said that many times before already, but I'm just going to say it again. In the piece, and it has to bestow the idea of Russian pride, so I'm going to play it. We hear that slowing down of these chromatic lines and falls. They slow down, become more slower. We get the point from here. Here's this ballad of O Lord Save Thy People. We have the percussion echoing the chimes of the bells. Another crash from the percussion. Once again echoed, O Lord, save thy people. As this continues, we reach our final climax of building, continues to build, gets louder and louder. This leads into the finale and the main finale, the part of the main theme and God Save the Tsar. Now, in my opinion, this is the most intense part of the piece overall and in the finale. The melody is heard early on and comes in strong and loud. Once again, like I said, this is the melody and the part. If you repeat it to people, they will recognize it and know what you're talking about. As the melody continues, we hear the playing of the Russian anthem, God Save the Tsar. Both fall into a homo rhythm ending in the final rendition of the main melody. The piece finally concludes with 3 long and loud chords, so I'm going to play that. So with that unbelievable conclusion, in my opinion, I guess, why don't we go into why I enjoy this piece overall? So really, I had heard the first starting out, I had heard the melody before the da 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 da, and I thought it was exciting. I never really thought of it till I saw V for Vendetta a couple years ago. It right now it is one of my favorite movies, and it's in the finale, and you actually do hear it throughout the entire movie. It's when the anti-hero V blows up the Parliament building in London, and this is done by BV because he acts as more of um a advocate for the people. So at the time, London is in a futuristic time, and they're very tyrannical. So in order to show that he's fighting for the people to abolish this really bad government, he blows up Parliament, and Parliament blows up to that final line, as I said, in the final line, the most exciting one, with the main theme and God Save the Tsar. So my next point is the song really impacts a lot of emotions throughout it and has a lot of variety. Which I really enjoy in a piece. You really feel a lot. You feel the intensiveness, you feel the excitement towards the end of the finale, you feel the tradition, kind of the dance feel, hear something beautiful towards the middle. You hear like an actual type of march theme, I guess, and very like intense theme in the beginning when the French are coming in, and you basically feel a lot when you go throughout it. It has a faster piece and is loud. It has a faster pace. I'm sorry, and is loud. And this is what I really like and enjoy in music. I really like listening to faster paced pieces and louder. I guess yeah, that's basically what I enjoy in music. Which is very closely related to my next point. It's I really do love Tchaikovsky's style. I've played March Slav before. I love that. Um, I love the Nutcracker Suite music. I love the music from Swan Lake. It's very loud, it's dramatic. There's an emphasis on wind and percussion, and there's very complex rhythms. That's what he puts into this music. There's a storyline that goes along with it too, which goes along with the dramatic theme, and it's just fun to listen to. It's entertaining. There's an aspect to it that's just very magical. And finally, my last point is this was the final piece I had played in my high school career. I had really fond memories of putting a lot of energy and passion into playing this song. The finale, I remember I almost passed out because I put so much energy and just overall energy and like so much heart into this piece because I enjoyed it and I loved it, and I just remember playing extremely loud at this finale. So let's coast some points over here. I have the poster from the movie, and this is my band from last year playing at the Chicago Symphony Center. So with that, that's my presentation on Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture. Here are my credits for what I had used and researched and photos. There were a lot of photos, so here they are. And that is it. Thank you for listening.